So, what is the...
I know Jim Mattis, Joe, and I'm no George Marshall. Okay? I'll just tell you right up front. He's one of my heroes.
A lot of people would disagree with that. Let's talk about the book, and if there are CEOs out there watching, or there's small business owners that are watching right there, somebody that wants to start a business, or a football coach that's trying to figure out who to recruit for their college football team. You just go down the list. What for you, what's the most important leadership skill that comes out of this book? Because you all give us a great story about what leadership can do, where you had the commander in Vietnam that said nobody can predict when they're going to die, but they can control how they're going to face death, and how that inspired those young men in Vietnam. How do you inspire people today in the workforce? How do you find the leaders of tomorrow for your business, for your organization, for your church?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to write this book with Jim is that he had a leadership style that really resonated as he kept going up in rank. And I realized it was because he had two basic principles. And the first was, whatever the task was, he spent an enormous amount of time getting the vision and the goal straight as the leader. He'd say, this is what I think we have to do. And he would make sure he had that
going back, defining the problem
time
first.
And time again.
Who is it? Somebody, one leader once said, 90% of the problem is defining what it is, right?
And once Jim had done that so that every corporal understood, everyone, then he took his hands off, and he didn't believe in command and control. What I really liked about, and we try to get into the stories, this isn't about command and control. Get rid of that word control. When you're the leader, as Jim was, you set the vision, and then you empower your subordinates, trust them, and encourage their initiative. Jim?
Yeah, you reward the initiative, I think, and what you want to make sure you're doing, too, is you're selecting who are going to be representing you as the subordinate leaders. Generally speaking, when growing up in the Naval Service, the Navy and Marines gave me first-rate leaders. They were well-trained for whatever we knew they would have to do. They were well-educated to take in stride the things they couldn't anticipate, so you knew how to solve things. You just were unpredictable. But I wanted humility out of those people. I wanted people humble enough to know they didn't know it all. The reason you have people called commander or CEO or leader is because they cannot do the job on their own, can't do it on their own. That's why they're given all these other people and assets. So how do you enlist down to the youngest sailors and Marines? Yeah. How do you enlist their ownership of that mission? Mike?
You know, General, you have the unique gift of being able to say, follow me, and people follow you because it's an us thing, not a you thing. Your life and your family has been the United States Marine Corps. You've written letters to mothers, parents of young men who served under you who have been killed in battle. Mm-hmm. What does that do to someone? What does that do to you?
Well, that's I'm not sure I'm articulate enough to explain that. It humbles you. It humbles you to know that from the 20-year-old corporal who pointed a 19-year-old and points toward the enemy, and the guy nods and gets up and starts moving against them, to the admirals and generals that so much rides on when I gave them their orders and saying, I need you to get out in the waters of the Persian Gulf. I need you to keep those sea lanes open, but I can't support you getting into a war. We've got to avoid war at all costs. You know, eventually it really drove home a point to me, Mike, that comes to mind here. You all know what my primary job was as the commander of U.S. Central Command. I coordinated all the military activities in the United States across that tumultuous Middle East. My real job was, how do you keep the peace for one more year, or what passes for peace in the Middle East, one more month, one more week, one more day, one more hour, to give the diplomats time to work their magic and try to make this a little bit better world, so you write fewer of those letters. home to the others. You want the diplomats always speaking from a position of strength. And that was why we have a military out there, to ensure that they do.
You might mention, Jim, what you kept under your desk, under the blotter of your desk.
Yeah, Bing knows me so well. He knows I still keep this question. I used to stand at a stand-up desk where all the deployment orders come in, sending young troops, young men and women, young patriots who volunteered to defend this experiment overseas. And the question I wrote down to myself was, will this commitment contribute sufficiently to the well-being of the American people to justify putting our troops in a position to die? Not in harm's way, not to possibly get injured, in a position to die. And I would look at it sat right there on my desk. I hand wrote it, and I taped it to my desk so that I would never overlook it. And then the deployment orders would come in twice a week, generally, and I would be signing off on them. And they're very sensitive in many cases. In other cases, they're very straightforward. You read about the casualty lists later on this very news show. But it's very sobering, it's very humbling, and it also brings a sense of gravity and responsibility that changes everything about how you look at the world.
Mr. Secretary, General Mattis, thank you so much for being with us. Bing West, thank you so much for being with us, too.
The book is Call Sign Chaos, Learning to Lead. And we thank you both for being on with us this morning for such an extended period of time. And we will be right back with much more Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.